Kanse, I'm Kristen Achkite. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. The Assembly of First Nations Special Chiefs meeting is on its last day in Ottawa. This morning it was highlighted by an appearance by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. APTN Savannah Craig joins us now from Ottawa's Rogers Centre. Savannah, we heard that the Prime Minister got a rough ride by some of those present. What can you tell us about that?
Hi, Kristen. Policing has been at the forefront of the AFN this week, and when Trudeau arrived this morning, he received numerous questions during question period, but one of the questions that did come to him was from a group of mothers who had lost their children due to interactions with police. Two of these mothers were present. Martha Martin and Edith Wells. Martha has lost two children. Edith has lost one child just this past September. And both mothers were inviting the federal government and Prime Minister Trudeau to come meet with them, hear their experiences, but they were also demanding for more to be done to stop the killing of First Nations people during interactions with police. And this, of course, follows the vote on Tuesday at the AFN, where the AFN is demanding for the federal government to launch a national inquiry into these deaths and into systemic discrimination within policing in Canada.
Savannah, what were some of the other major issues that came up for Trudeau and his cabinet ministers?
So the boil water advisory was one of them. The federal government did promote that they have lifted 125 boil water advisories across the country since they came in power. They said that there are still 31 boil water advisories left across 29 communities in Canada that they must lift, and they said that they will be working towards this. And another issue that came up a few times was the issue of unmarked graves and burial sites in Canada. The federal government said that Special Interlocutor Kimberly Murray, who has been invited to different communities across Canada where there are unmarked burial sites, has put together a report, her final report, and has made recommendations. The federal government says that they are reviewing these recommendations and will decide what to do next following the completion of reviewing these recommendations. Another issue that was brought up within this is the denialism of these unmarked graves. It was brought up a few times during question period, but the federal government did not directly respond to this. Child welfare was brought up a few times. The federal government said that they are doing what they can, and they will essentially try to ensure that Indigenous children grow up in their communities and learn their culture and language.
That's APTN Savannah Craig on day 3 of the special AFN Chiefs Assembly at the Rogers Centre in Ottawa. Thanks for the update, Savannah.
Thanks, Kristen.
The Assembly of First Nations says 10 First Nations people were killed during interactions with police in Canada between August to November. On Tuesday, the AFN passed a motion to call for the federal government to launch an inquiry into these deaths and systemic racism in policing. The families of victims were in Ottawa on Wednesday. Once again, here's Savannah Craig.
Never forget that call or the time that my son was never going to come home.
That's Edith Wells talking about when she received the call her son was dead. He died this past September in an altercation with Calgary police.
I am just so hurt, devastated, and shattered. And there's a big void in our community.
Mothers who lost their children during police interactions were invited to the Assembly of First Nations to share their experiences, including Edith Wells and Martha Martin. Martin lost her daughter Chantel Moore during a police interaction in 2020, and then lost her son Mike Martin while he was in police custody 5 months later. She says it's important for mothers to be part of the inquiry.
And being able to have those face-to-face conversations with leadership is, it's more touching than when you read about it in a newspaper.
First Nations chiefs across Canada are demanding for an end to the deaths of Indigenous people during police interactions.
And that's really what the chiefs are calling for from across this country, from coast to coast to coast, that the killing must stop.
In a unanimous vote at the AFN on Tuesday, chiefs are calling for the federal government of Canada to launch a national inquiry to look into these deaths. The motion was brought forth by Chief Alan Pulches and Chief Jerry Jack, a former officer.
And I got out of the RCMP after 17 years because I couldn't take the racism anymore.
The AFN says the next step is to meet with the federal government to launch this inquiry.
In our own land, we should feel safe. We shouldn't be threatened or afraid of police.
We call for the national inquiry so the AFN collaborate with the federal government. Because what is happening is systemic racism within provincial organizations policing.
National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak says she has met with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to ensure this issue will be addressed if the Conservatives come into power next fall.
This is a black eye for Canada, and it's not acceptable for First Nations people.
Savannah Craig, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Edmonton Centre MP Randy Boissonnault has released a 2-page statement on his Twitter page regarding his Indigenous heritage. However, despite the length, his answers remain the same since he stepped down as Federal Employment Cabinet Minister on November 22nd. With more, here's T.R. Wheatley.
Accused of shape-shifting Indigenous ancestry, as well his co-owned business tried to access a federal grant in 2020 that was meant for Indigenous people. However, the business bid was not successful. In his latest statement, he says he was adopted by an Indigenous family where the great-grandmother on his mother's side was Cree. And according to his statement, quote, "During the pandemic, my family delved further into our history, which led to my adoptive mother and brother becoming Métis citizens earlier this year," unquote. In the past, Boissonnault has called himself a non-status adopted Cree and maintains he's never claimed Indigenous status for benefit. Boissonnault's statement also saying he has sought legal counsel against his former business partner. Once elected into office, he says he left his business and his partner continued to use his name without his consent.
Now to a recent suspicious death in the White Bear First Nation in southeast Saskatchewan. On Tuesday at around 2:30 a.m., Carlisle RCMP responded to a report of an injured male at a home in the First Nation. When they arrived, they found a 33-year-old man from Coronach deceased. Saskatchewan RCMP Major Crimes is now asking anyone with information to come forward and said there will be an increased police presence for an undetermined amount of time in the First Nation. In a number of statements posted to social media, White Bear First Nation Chief Jonathan Passop said, "A suspect is in custody with the RCMP. Major Crimes is on the nation continuing the investigation. There are still persons of interest that need to be identified and found, but RCMP believe the community is safe. Mental health services has been requested and will be available for anybody who wishes to access it. Health administration and other services in the First Nation will resume as of 1 p.m. today." The National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation will now have access to the personal records and documents of the Oblates of OMI Lacombe, Canada, after signing an agreement to bring truth to light for survivors of the Indian residential school system. With more, once again, here's T.R. Wheatley.
Aspects of our ministry have caused harm.
In a small and intimate setting inside the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation, the Oblates of OMI Lacombe, Canada have made a commitment to open up personnel records and documents to help the centre in its research. Father Ken Thorson leads OMI Canada. He said the Oblates first apologized to survivors back in 1991.
While this commitment was clear in its intention, we acknowledge that our follow-through has often been too slow.
With the agreement, the Oblates have committed to funding an archivist for the NCTR to help in the information transformation. In the past, files were protected and stayed closed for 50 years after a missionary died. Oblates CAO Rob Mailer said that is also changing.
From now on, the personnel files of Oblates who worked in the residential schools who have been deceased for at least 2 years will be shared with the National Centre.
Raymond Frogner, head of archives at NCTR, says this is a significant move by the Oblates.
I salute them for the fact that they've opened up their archives more than most public archives are currently open.
The Oblates arrived in Canada in 1841. There were over 700 missionaries in 40 residential schools, 299 in Quebec alone. To date, 80% of all handwritten journals have been digitized and transferred to the NCTR. Elder in residence Florence Painter is thankful to see this day come for survivors.
And we still see the impacts today. But that does not mean we shouldn't be proud of who we are. Our languages, our traditions, and our histories are really important to us.
While this relationship between this centre and the Oblates moves forward in reconciliation, Fragner says there is still much more truth to uncover with others.
The Sisters of St. Anne, the Sisters of Charity, the Grey Nuns, the Misericorde, and we would like to have a similar agreement with all of those groups.
To get as many records as they can so the true picture of Canada's dark history will come to light. T.R. Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
A small community in Yukon was the center of attention recently after its newly elected municipal council refused to swear an oath of the allegiance to the monarch. Sarah Connors tells us how their refusal led the territorial government to offer an alternative.
It was all smiles at Dawson City Council's swearing-in ceremony on Tuesday evening. The small community of 1,100 people in northwestern Yukon has received a lot of media attention lately. Last month, the newly elected council refused to swear the oath of allegiance to the king.
I did not intend for this to be a huge media phenomenon that it turned out to be. It's great that it did.
It all started with Councillor Darwin Lin, a member of the Trondok-Wichan First Nation living in Dawson City. Lin says he wasn't comfortable swearing the oath because of the Crown's history with Indigenous people.
I was hesitant on it. I actually sat there and I looked at it and I read it probably about 15 times. And it didn't get any easier to do.
Lin's 4 other fellow council members agreed, and they too declined to take the oath.
And I didn't want Darwin to be uncomfortable. And so I thought, I'm going to support him, damn it.
But that was a problem. Municipal councillors are legally required to take the oath within 40 days of being elected. If a solution couldn't be reached by December 9th, council seats would be considered null and void and a by-election would be called.
I didn't expect it to go as far as it did, but I think the conversation was needed to be had.
Yukon's Municipal Services branch had to come up with a solution, and fast. Its alternative? Municipal councillors can now swear an oath to the Constitution of Canada.
This change should help Yukon First Nations feel welcome and respected. It's a step in the ongoing journey towards reconciliation.
Lin is pleased with the alternative and the support from his fellow council members.
I don't think any of us thought that this is how we would start, but I'm happy it is how we started. It shows that we are a united team, and I'm happy with that.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Saskatchewan continues to lead the way in Canada with high HIV rates. That story when we come back in about 3 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back. Saskatchewan continues to lead the way in high HIV infection rates with still no provincial strategy in place. Advocates for Saskatchewan's HIV-positive residents are calling for a provincial strategy to support those living with the virus and to help stop the spread. CTV's Stacey Hine has the details.
Saskatchewan continues to have the highest HIV diagnosis in the country, with a rate of 5 times the national average per capita, according to the Public Health Agency of Canada. Caitlin Roberts, who works with people living with HIV, says the statistics are not surprising.
We haven't seen a substantial investment in HIV, nor have we seen a substantial strategy to address it.
The Saskatchewan Infectious Disease Network recently released its Saskatoon HIV Program Evaluation Report. When looking into HIV care services in Saskatoon, the report says there were gaps and duplication in services, which highlights the need for a focused strategy for HIV and AIDS prevention and treatment. The report says Saskatchewan is currently without an HIV strategy and says its replacement, the Saskatchewan HIV Collaborative, has a lack of understanding of its direction and role.
Having a provincial strategy, I think, is of the utmost importance in terms of being able to provide coordinated access to care.
The report says while the HIV care system in Saskatoon is functioning, the relationships between providers are strained. Westside Community Clinic's Dr. Morris Markinton says it's because everyone is competing for the same funding.
We're competing against each other and trying to position ourselves ahead of the next one so that we can get proper funding so our programs can be sustained.
He says coordinated care between organizations would alleviate that and make it easier for patients to access services. Both he and Caitlin Roberts say addressing housing and addiction issues are also key.
You know, housing and addiction play a big role in terms of stabilizing people with HIV. So until we can come up with a strategy to better support those people, lift them out of homelessness, I think we're going to continue to see rates rise.
CTV News reached out to the Saskatchewan Health Authority, which said the Ministry of Health is working on a response. CTV News did not hear back from the ministry by broadcast. Stacey Hine, CTV News, Saskatoon.
According to the U.S. National Library of Medicine, Indigenous people account for 65 to 80% of HIV-1 infections, despite only making up 16% of Saskatchewan's population. Experts blame this on social, systemic, and structural shortfalls within the province. APTN's Fraser Needham joins us now to tell us what's coming up on tonight's Nation to Nation. Fraser?
We're at the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly in Ottawa this week, where we talked to National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepenak about what is happening at the Assembly and the challenges that lie ahead. AFN British Columbia Regional Chief Terry Chichi is also here to talk about divisions on the executive over allegations of a lack of consultation when the National Chief has made deals with Ottawa. And we also talked to former AFN National Chief George Erasmus about his new book, Haute Enough, that's coming up later this evening on Nation to Nation.
Thank you, Fraser. We now want to tell you about this week's web poll question. Over on our website, we ask, do you think Métis people should be included in the federal non-insured health benefits program? Your answers are yes or no. Have your say at www.aptnnews.ca. It has been a 50-year fight to try and bring home a killer whale who advocates say was abducted as a baby. Now a documentary has been done highlighting that journey. That interview when we come back. Starting on the east, St. John 0, Charlottetown 0. Cartwright -10, Nujiwak -11. Gaspé 1, Saguenay -2. Ottawa +1 in Sun, Toronto 0. Sudbury -7, Wawa -9. Churchill -22, Puckatawagan -16. -17 in Gimli and Sun, Dauphin partly cloudy and -13. Swift Current -7, North Battleford -8. Uranium City -12, Buffalo Narrows -9. Over on the west, High Level -12, Peace River 3. Red Deer -1, Edmonton 5. Bella Coola 7, Quesnel 5. Prince Rupert 7, Sandspit 6. Watson Lake -13, Dawson -11. -7 in Yellowknife, Wrigley -10. Fort McPherson -21, Colville Lake -9. -30 in Baker Lake, Chesterfield -27. And Clyde River -20, Agulik -22. A documentary about the 50-year fight to bring home a killer whale that was captured as a baby will have its hometown premiere at the Whistler Film Festival this weekend. Resident Orca is about an unlikely partnership between Indigenous matriarchs, a billionaire philanthropist, killer whale experts, and the aquarium's new owner taking on the impossible task of freeing Lolita. Raynell Morris is a Lummi tribal member, matriarch, and one of the executive producers of Resident Orca. We spoke with her earlier this week. Raynell, thank you for talking to us today. Can you first start off with telling us about this documentary?
Well, Haishka for having me. The documentary Resident Orca is Skelly Chuktanut Tokatai Lolita's life journey. She's a relative of ours that was captured about 54 years ago and held that whole time at Miami Seaquarium, where she died in captivity.
Raynell, you have campaigned for many years for Lolita to be returned to the Salish Sea. Why has this been a fight you've been so invested in?
Because in our way, we consider her a relative, and by her capture in the 70s, our late Chief Salik said it's just like the Indian resident boarding schools, where they came and took our children, put them in schools to take the savage out of them, strip them of their culture, their food, their families, their home. And he said that's what they've done to Skelly Chuktanut, our relative, and she needs to come home.
Raynell, what's happened to Lolita is compared to being taken away to boarding school, like you said there. Can you talk a little bit more about what's being done now to try and get this resolved?
Well, unfortunately, we weren't able to save her life. But through her sacrifices, she is responsible for getting the licensing pulled at Miami Seaquarium. It was terminated. There are over 500 marine mammals, but we call them beings, that we believe she saved. She is fighting for her family. The southern resident killer whales are on the endangered species list here in the Pacific Northwest. Her mother, Ocean Sun, is 93 years old and still swims freely. She's the matriarch of the L-Pod. So they're starving. They want salmon. Lactamus people are starving. We want salmon. So what happens to them happens to us.
The film has screened in the United States to sold-out crowds, making its Western Canada debut this weekend. What do you hope audiences take away from the documentary right now?
I hope they can understand that we all have a responsibility to voice the injustices of captivity. They call them animals, but they're relatives. They have a family. They have a spirit. We need to stop and return the animals to sanctuaries, and if they could be rehabilitated and entered back into the wild, that's what we need to do.
Well, right now we'll have to leave it there. We thank you so much for your time, and we'll definitely check out this documentary.
Thank you, my friend.
And that's your daytime newscast for this Thursday, December 5th. We're back again for your evening national newscast. Make sure to join us then. From everyone at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching Exe. And we leave you with a special birthday shout out to Irene Young, TR Wheatley's grandmother. She's turning 79 years young today. Happy birthday.